McDonald's is rolling out a big new menu item in the U.S. Domino's is absolutely destroying the rest of the pizza category, and one major fast casual saw its sales drop by double digits. Welcome to Extra Serving, a podcast from Nation's Restaurant News. I'm Editor-in-Chief Sam Oches, joined by my colleague, Executive Editor Alicia Kelso. Alicia, I think we're going kind of stir crazy here because we were just singing Hamilton before we made it official.
It's been that kind of week. It's been I lost count of how many earnings calls were this week.
It was a lot. We're both gearing up for a lot of travel. You and I are both on the road next week. You will be in Texas for the Women's Food Service Forum annual conference. I know that's a big one every year. You enjoy going to, and I haven't been for a few years, but that is a phenomenal conference. A lot to be learned there.
3,000 attendees, just catching a tailwind from each other. And gosh, I think I need it.
Yeah.
It's just a buoyant, development, networking, positive environment. And I still have PTSD from 1997 when I got kicked out of Lilith there because I tried to use the men's restroom because the women's restroom line was so long. And yeah, I got kicked out, Cincinnati.
Wow.
And I love the Women's Food Service Forum because they only have one men's. They turn the men's restroom into the women's restroom because it's 90% women, and I think it helps me recover from that Lilith Fair circus at 97.
I remember
that's probably one of my favorite things about it.
I remember that very well because then us men who attend, and I am not complaining, I think that is a totally fine thing to do, but us men do have to walk a little further down the hall to find the one men's restroom that is left open. But again, not complaining. It is also going to help that I have not checked any forecast or anything, but you have to imagine it's going to be a little bit warmer in Texas. I mean, I hate to kick a dead horse here, but I'm convinced that once spring arrives, I think things get much better. I just think this has been the most brutal winter. The weather has been bad almost all over the country. And you're describing just, you're talking about us going stir crazy. For me personally, that's really rooted in the weather. I feel like I need a nice warm day. You can maybe tell, but it is blue skies outside here in Ohio today. It's supposed to get close to 60. I'm going to get outside and go for a walk. We just need more of that. And so hopefully when you're in Texas, the weather will be nice. And it will be all around uplifting. I have checked the forecast in California where I will be going. I'm going to Napa next week, Alicia. We are very excited to do our Menu Masters collaboration event out in at the Culinary Institute of America's Napa campus, Copia campus in Napa, California. This is a really fun thing we always get to do every year where we pull in the winners of our Menu Masters Awards to develop a menu for the Menu Masters celebration, which happens in Chicago during the restaurant show. It's just a lot of fun. It feels very Top Chef-y because we film it. We bring all these chefs into a kitchen. They develop menu items from scratch together. It's a lot of fun. And all I have to do is just go and see the thing and eat the food. And yes, Alicia, sometimes I eat the food on camera. I know that gives you the heebie-jeebies. You cannot do it. But I think we're going to teach you. I think we're going to make you do it.
No, I can do it. I will not do it.
There's a difference.
Yes.
You can do it. You just won't do it. But I'm looking forward to being out there. It's one of my favorite parts of the country. Lots of good eats out there. I'm certainly looking forward to getting to Gott's Roadside in St. Helena, which is just this wonderful burger stand in the most beautiful little town in Napa. Let's get to it. We should talk about, just so much again, this happens earnings season week after week for about 3 or 4 weeks. You get a lot. It's a fire hose. Before we get into earnings, though, let's talk about McDonald's because McDonald's did make some headlines this week by announcing that its Big Arch burger is going to be coming to the U.S. This is a burger that's been tested internationally since 2024. I have the description here. 2 quarter-pound beef patties, 3 slices of melted white cheddar cheese, crispy and slivered onions, lettuce, pickles, toasted buns with sesame and poppy seed, and a tangy Big Arch sauce. That is from your write-up, Alicia. That does not come off the tongue quite as fun as the Big Mac jingle. I don't know if there's going to be a Big Arch jingle, but not the same thing. Why is this a big deal, Alicia?
I think it's a big deal because McDonald's has tried to break into the premium burger market before. They had the Arch Deluxe back in my day, back in my Little Affair days. They had this signature craft lineup. I think it was 2017-ish. And none of them have really caught on. because probably McDonald's has the Big Mac, right? How do
Right.
you supersede that? And I think what's interesting about that is we are in knee deep in this value environment where McDonald's had a massive quarter in the fourth quarter because it finally found its traction amid that value environment after a year and a half of trying. And so this is a limited time offer in the United States. Ideally, it will be successful enough to earn a spot on the permanent menu. Of course, we will be looking at operational, efficiencies. Can it do so with the volumes that McDonald's puts out? That's the $1 million question right now. And I think if it is able to do that, like it did in the United Kingdom, its most recent market where it was in test and it did so well, it's now permanent, then I think it's going to be a great tailwind for McDonald's to balance out the traction it's been finding on value, n- most specifically to protect those precious margins.
Right.
Every executive I've talked to, every executive on every single earnings call has noted they do not expect this value environment to go away anytime soon. The consumer is still wildly unpredictable. We saw that with a mixed earnings bag this week. And the barbell menu, as we've talked about several times on this podcast, is critical to make sure that we are getting those access points for customers who are pulling back, but ideally nudging some of them more toward the premium offerings like the big arch. Now,
Mhm.
I don't, the prices vary by market with McDonald's. It's always hard to tell. They're not in my market yet until next week, but I am seeing online that they range from about 750 to up to 11 in some markets. And so, we'll see. I think that it's worth noting too that McDonald's, this is part of their beef focus. They have 3 category teams that were put into place last year, one specifically to focus on beef. All of the news has been on chicken. They're not done with beef, and this is going to be a big play. I also think it's worth noting that Burger King had their investor day this week and came out with the news that they have enhanced their signature Whopper
Mm,
for the first time in 10 years, including new buns, new mayo, a new box to keep the heat better. So I think we're kind of in a core menu update enhancement phase of some sorts. The consumer is demanding that. It's very
yeah.
interesting.
Kind of makes me think of, I mean, McDonald's itself did this with the Angus burger, back in 20, I don't know, 12, it might have been, coming out of the last time we were in this economic issue, having these economic issues when we had the recession. But the Angus line really, I think in the end, I don't know if you would call it a failure, but at the end of the day, Angus line got pulled. It was not a long-term platform for McDonald's. And I can't help but also think of something like the Arch Deluxe from the 90s. Like sometimes McDonald's comes out with these new burger builds and it's like a big deal, like, oh, we've got this new burger and it's kind of a premium kind of thing. But then they just sort of fizzle. It feels like people go for a quarter pounder and Big Mac and chicken nuggets. And so I guess why do we think Big Arch will succeed where some of those others have failed?
I think again to go back to that point, it's just a different environment than it was in the 90s. Consumers demand more now. And there's been a significant blurring of the lines where consumers don't care that a burger is coming from Chili's versus McDonald's. They just want the same quality from all of the places because
Right.
everything is sort of a more of a level playing field than it's ever been. And that has changed consumer behavior. So if I want a burger and I go on a delivery marketplace, for example, to get one, typically, I'm gonna go for the higher quality or perceived higher quality one with more abundance. McDonald's wants to play in that lane too.
Right.
And so, I just think this is a consumer-driven trend, and I think it's good, again, for McDonald's to balance out the margins amid a very intense value environment that is not showing any signs of budging anytime soon.
Well, speaking of value and speaking of category leaders, let's jump into earnings and start with Domino's because Domino's. I mean, look, Domino's. The story of Domino's is well known by now. I mean, over the course of 15 years, they went from a brand that was sort of an also ran in the pizza category and people didn't like their pizza. They reinvent their pizza, surge ahead, take over for Pizza Hut as the number one pizza brand now in the world. And then the market share just kind of grows and grows. And that continues now. Domino's reports most recent quarter up 3.7% same store sales. And I'm going to let you say the quote from Russell Weiner, Alicia, because CEO Russell Weiner had this great quote about why Domino's seems to be doing so well.
Yeah, and I don't have it verbatim, but it is essentially there is a narrative about fast food pizza being it not being competitive anymore, and that is simply not true. His thesis is that while we're seeing massive, major struggles from their main competitors, Papa John's and Pizza Hut, he doesn't think that is an issue relative to pizza QSR specifically. Rather, he's peacocking his feathers and saying it's because we're so great. And it's hard to argue with that when you look at the numbers. I mean, we talk about case studies and consistency on this call every week, especially during earnings season. We talked about it with Texas Roadhouse. We talked about it with Chili's. Domino's very much belongs in that same conversation. And they, I think this was their 9th straight quarter of positive sales. We'll talk about Pizza Hut. That is a completely different story.
Yeah.
Domino's keeps gaining market share and expects to gain even more, 1 to 2 more points in 2026. Given Papa John's call, I don't think that is unfeasible.
Yeah.
And again, he I think has the right to peacock his feathers, saying that the challenges we're seeing in QSR pizza are simply a reflection of Domino's strength. I don't think that's the whole story. I do think pizza has been disproportionately impacted with the accelerated growth of third-party delivery. Again, leveling that consideration set in a way that didn't exist 10 years ago.
Right.
But what I think is really interesting there is Domino's adjusted significantly with the growth in that third party marketplace. So you go to third party, you have no idea what you want to eat. You just know you want it there and quick. They started pushing heavily toward carryout. And now carryout is a big part of its business, and even bigger. I think they get 55% of their transactions from carryout, accounting for 44% of sales.
Wow.
So delivery makes up 45% of transactions and about 6% of sales. So delivery makes up more revenue, but it's not the primary volume driver anymore. We're talking about Domino's, the originator of delivery, but they were, smart enough to understand. They skated where the puck was going and said, okay, everybody's coming into our world now of delivery. Let's try push and carry out.
We're talking about what is it again? What is it again? We're talking about, Alicia. We're talking about. Darn it! I wish it would.
Yeah, I know exactly. Can I just do
Darn!
It?
No! Wait. Oh man! If only I had tested that before, so it wasn't so awkwardly timed. Folks, that just sits there. That just sits there, ready for me to hit play anytime. So long as I remember how to hit play, we're golden. But Alicia, when we were in Ann Arbor last year talking to them as part of the brand icon, I hope I'm getting this right, but I believe Russell talked about Domino's having about 25% market share in the pizza category. Does that sound right to you? Did he mention that number on the call?
You talked to him. I did not.
I didn't know if you talked about it.
Well, and if you think I retain information from September, then you don't know me well enough.
I remember him referencing that they had about 25% share of the entire category, and they thought they could get to 50. I'm going to double check those numbers, but I remember him saying something along those lines. And it's just so crazy because, you hear that and you're like, how do you think you could possibly do that? But as we see, they're cruising. And by the way, let's talk about Papa John's. Papa John's also reported this week. I mean, tale of two brands here, because Papa John's, they announced that they're going to close 300 restaurants. They're going to lay off 7% of their corporate workforce. Their same store sales down 5%. I mean, and this is after, a couple weeks ago, we talked about Pizza Hut. Pizza Hut also doing pretty poorly. So, I mean, it is really no surprise that Domino's is as cocky as they're being, because when you look at their competitors. Their competitors are really floundering. What do we think is going wrong at Papa John's?
That's a great question. I was a little shocked by these numbers, down 5% on top of 4%, negative 4% in Q4 2024, by the way. And
Oof.
so they've been negative almost the full 2 years. I think they had one positive quarter in the past 2 years. As you mentioned, closing 300 locations by the end of 2027. Pizza Hut announced earlier this month they will be closing 250 locations. That is a big chunk of pizza places going away.
Yep.
And they're targeting underperforming locations, as is the theme right now in an environment where, some locations, the juice just isn't worth the squeeze for Papa John's. That means locations that have 600,000 AUVs and below. We talked at length on this podcast, Sam, about how that the P&L has changed. 600,000 AUV is probably worked fine in 2019, but
Right.
with inflation up across the board from energy to food to labor, 30+%, that needs to be adjusted. And so, Papa John's also, when Todd Penegor came on board last year, he mentioned there was a lot of complexity, and we're seeing some correction there under his leadership, eliminating Papa Diaz and Papa Bites to make sure that they're focused on their core. That is another theme.
Yep.
All products of a challenged environment. But I do think this is giving, no question, Domino's more confidence. Both Papa John's and Pizza Hut too are rumored to be on the market. Well,
Mm.
we know Pizza Hut is.
Yeah.
But so that is an interesting narrative as well. Is Domino's gaining so much share so quickly that it's going to take Papa John's and Pizza Hut private to get these ducks in a row behind closed doors?
Right.
I think I think both of those things could feasibly happen this year.
It's fascinating. I mean, I just taking a step back and looking at pizza in general. I mean, I'm gonna have pizza tonight. It's Friday, Alicia. We got Friday night pizza night as a family. Pizza is something that I believe it's something like 90% of consumers eat at least. I want to say weekly. It's just so unbelievable to me that the pizza category is in this position. I do wonder, is there an opportunity here for emerging pizza brands to take over? I mean, because Domino's can only take so much share. I mean, they could get up to that 40 to 50% share level, but like at the same time, people do want variety. People want some options. So I have to wonder if there's an opportunity for some other brands to grow into that space where you said like hundreds and hundreds of Pizza Huts and Papa John's are going to be closing. What comes in that void? But we do have to move on. We have to talk about the full service category, casual dining brands. A number of them also reported this week. Let's start with Dine. Dine, near and dear to you, Alicia. I know Applebee's especially. We love to cheer for this brand. Applebee's slightly down, but I think there is still it's still kind of a positive story to tell here, which is IHOP is slightly up. Tell me what's going on at Dine Brands, what we should think about what's going on.
I don't think there was anything earth shattering from this call. Applebee's dramatically improved its performance throughout 2025, including 2 positive quarters for the first time since the beginning of 2023. They found their cadence in value. It seems like, this value environment came in hot in mid 2024, and everybody was just trying to figure out what consumers needed and wanted with an abrupt pullback. Applebee's was a part of that, and it took them a while, and they finally got it by going to relying on their trusted and signature 2 for $25 menu, complemented by, pulsing in a new entree every quarter. So there was new news and it worked. And like I said, 25 was a marked improvement from 24. They're not adjusting their strategy at all accordingly. And I think IHOP was up slightly. IHOP ended the year with 2 consecutive quarters of positive traffic, which I think is really worth mentioning because the family dining segment, as we've covered here, has struggled throughout the past couple of years. With consumers pulling back, family dining seems to be their first target of pulling back. So IHOP is sort of bucking that trend a little bit. All of their value adjustments are working. IHOP extended their value menu to 7 days a week. But their customers are still buying premium products. So that barbell strategy is working for them. Like We mentioned we hope it works for McDonald's and literally everybody else because the
Yeah.
value environment's not going away. Dine Brands is still very bullish on their dual brand. They expect to, almost double that footprint this year, where they have an IHOP and an Applebee's under one roof to get a maximum amount of efficiencies out of all 4 day parts. And I think perhaps the biggest takeaway for me is they're reducing their number of promotions a year. I did have a call with John Payton, the CEO, who mentioned obviously, consumers don't come into those restaurants as often as they do QSRs or coffee places. And so if you have 10 to 12 promotions a year, like Applebee's and IHOP did have in 2024 when they were struggling, consumers are going to miss that, right? They're bound to miss it. So they have pulled back on their promotions to 4 to 5 a year. It bolsters the ad fund because they don't have to shoot as many commercials. It's better for operations. It's better for consumers who have more of an opportunity to come in and check out what's going on. And it's a right cadence for casual dining. So that I think was the big takeaway from that call.
You mentioned family dining possibly at risk of losing traffic. We saw First Watch reported their traffic was down, but their sales were up, probably accounting for prices. But also, let's talk about sort of more the bar and grill industry or bar and grill category, because we had Bloomin', Red Robin, and BJ's all also report, and kind of a mixed bag. But Bloomin' had a positive quarter, first one in a while. BJ's had its 6th straight quarter of positive same-store sales growth. Seems like there's, I don't know, across the board for me, I'm getting good vibes out of full service, which seems to validate a lot of what we've talked about recently, especially as it relates to Chili's, as it relates to Texas Roadhouse, Olive Garden. We've suggested, hey, casual dining maybe is gaining some momentum. I think from these brands, I'm not so worried about First Watch's traffic being down. It just seems to me, it's like, I think they're all in a pretty good spot. Maybe things have turned a corner for some of these brands. Do you agree, Alicia?
I don't know. I think that casual dining is an interesting story right now because in 2025 it was flat.
Yeah.
And flat is the new up for casual dining. It has not had a good couple of years. It was disproportionately impacted by the pandemic, especially. Um, and casual dining retrenched too prior to the pandemic. I think it was 2017. We saw several closures. So this segment seems to ebb and flow an awful lot. Some of these Applebee's needed a stable year in 2025 because 24 was, it was bad. And
Right.
Bloomin', I think, is kind of in that same boat. They are executing against a turnaround plan. If you have a turnaround plan in place and you're investing that much money in a turnaround place, let's hope we see some progress. And I think that's what's happening.
Yeah.
I'm Pollyannish. I want there to be progress. Progress is better than no progress, but I don't think it's like something that we need a fireworks show for.
Sure.
When flat is the new up, then we are having just a pragmatic conversation about this. So Bloomin', they're really focused on Outback right now. And, obviously it's a majority of their operating profit. So they should be. Their first, the fourth quarter was their first positive traffic quarter since the Q4 2021. Oh, during that little renaissance period we have where people are like, yay, the lockdowns are over. Let's go eat.
That was fun.
What's interesting, I think, about Outback that I think is the topic worth zooming in on is they're really, like I said, they're focused on Outback and steak leadership. So they are just pushing the gas on steak. They are committed to coaching and training to ensure restaurant field leaders are subject matter experts on steak. And they have a steak excellence certification training for multi-unit leaders. I think that's an interesting narrative. If you zoom out of the full service category as a whole, steak outperforms. And even in that, that sort of struggle, that challenge 2024 and stable 2025, steak outperformed. We're Americans. We like steak. So this is at Texas Roadhouse. And, Logan's are good. They're good example. Darden's steak concepts, good examples of why that's a pretty decent position to chase right now because
Right.
despite the softness generally, we still want that treat, that steak treat.
Well, and it's the occasion-based dining, right? I mean,
Mhm.
I think that's one thing that we've learned, certainly when we put out America's Favorite Chains, one thing we learned from that is when you have so many steak chains on that list, there is this connection for people where it's like they love steak chains because it's where they're going for celebrations, for birthdays, for anniversaries. They remember those brands very warmly, and I think especially today, as customers pull back on their spend, they're still going out for those opportunities to treat themselves. They're still going out for those indulgent meals. They're still going out for special celebrations. They just might have pulled back on, to your point, Alicia, some of the family dining. Hey, maybe let's not go out for brunch this weekend like
Yeah.
we usually do. So I think occasion-based dining experiences like that are not going away as much. And so that perhaps that's why you see the Outbacks of the world doing okay, certainly Texas Roadhouse, because people see those a little bit more as a special occasion that they want to protect.
Yep.
Anything else around full service? I mean, it seems Red Robin. Let's talk. I mean, Red Robin was down,
Mm.
but we think Fern took a pretty big wallop at Red Robin, right?
Well, Red Robin is a good example of having a strategy in place specifically focused on traffic. They are gaining traffic. They're still down, but Red Robin, like Applebee's, did some adjustments to find out what was going to stick with value in the value environment, and I think they found it. In July, they launched a big Yum Burger deal for $9.99. It did well enough that they extended that to a full menu with 6 items from $9.99 to $16.99 in January, and that seems to be their sweet spot. Again, that barbell menu, Sam,
Yeah,
9.99 is gonna get customers into a casual dining spot with, a perceived better burger alongside bottomless sides, which is what Red Robin is known for, and a bottomless drink. 9.99.
yeah,
That's a pretty good
that's a
deal,
great
but
deal,
ideally, when they come in now that they have this menu, they might be like, "Oh, you know what? I want that 16.99 deal or that 14.99 deal."
right?
So they're getting the cadence going from the first choice strategy that was put into place when Dave Pace came on as CEO in July, and I think that will be an interesting one to watch. They're still closing units, to, right-size their portfolio, but they're not closing as many right now as they initially expected. Dave Pace said that they had identified 20 that they think they can, get their performance back on track. And I think that's an interesting narrative among all of the closure talk happening right now.
Right,
And we'd like to see that. So
for
I
sure.
think that's probably a takeaway from Red Robin too.
All right, Alicia, we're going to move into the extra serving portion of our episode. We're sticking with earnings week, though. We've talked about pizza. We have talked about full service. Now it's time to talk about fast casual. And to help us do that, we're bringing in our managing editor, Leigh Anne Zinsmeister. Leanne, welcome to Extra Serving.
Hello.
Leanne, we have covered off pizza and full service as far as earnings this week. Some ups and downs, certainly across the industry. And when you look at fast casual specifically, some of the fast casual brands that reported this week, same thing, same narrative, some ups, some downs. Let's start with the down because that lets us finish on the up and finish a little bit more positive. The down was a big down. Sweetgreen just yesterday reported and I think much like was it last week when we talked about Wendy's and we were talking about our jaw being on the floor, we were talking about big yikes. Similar vibes here. Sweetgreen's same store sales down 11.5% in the last quarter, almost 8% for the year. Their traffic down over 13%. Leanne, give us the debrief on Sweetgreen and what is going on there.
Yikes.
Yeah,
I already knew those numbers, but hearing them come out of your mouth is depressing.
brutal. Yeah,
Sweetgreen is really going through it. I think a year or so ago they had a bit of a brand identity crisis. They went from being we're actually a technology company that serves food to selling the tech arm and being a restaurant brand, which is what they were from the beginning.
right.
They briefly put French fries on the menu, very briefly, and then took them away, but they were delicious. I'll give them that. And I think they're still trying to like find their footing. They revamped their loyalty program last year. It used to be a paid subscription platform, and now it's more of a traditional restaurant loyalty program. So some of the revenue losses are from losing that subscription model. Ideally, of course, long-term, free loyalty program drives more traffic because everyone is more willing to use it than to pay a fee. I think they're finding that they need to find a consumer who is not they need to be attracting a consumer who doesn't want to spend $20 on a lunch salad, which is their long-term reputation, right? They've kind of from the beginning had a terrible value proposition, and for a long time it didn't matter because they were the only or the considered the best quote unquote salad lunch spot on the market. So they're trying a lot of things right now. I think most notably next week they are launching a wrap. Where have we heard this before? I think you guys probably talk about wraps every week on this podcast. Sweetgreens is coming next week, and interestingly, the wrap will not cost more than $15, and some of the wraps will be priced as low as $9.95. So that is a big appeal to the lower income consumer, or even just a consumer who doesn't want to spend $20 on lunch, because who does? So to borrow a phrase from Alicia, they seem to be kind of just throwing things at the wall to see what sticks. They're expecting their full year numbers to be down, although not as far down as they are right now. They're hoping to claw back a bit, but we will see. They think they can turn this thing around. They are one quarter into a, I believe, 5-year turnaround plan. Again, turnaround plan, phrase of the moment. I don't think the first quarter really went how they were hoping it would, but hopefully they say they are laying the foundation to build a stronger business in the future. So we'll see about that.
Turnaround plan certainly on a lot of executive lips these days, but they're typically in 3-year terms, not 5. Shareholders are a little bit less patient, I think, than food service executives. And so it is interesting to see. Now, I find it almost fitting that Sweetgreens and Wendy's, now 2 brands, totally different, right? Very different customer bases, but very fitting that their numbers were so similar, because we have held up Wendy's as being that brand in QSR that's just throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks. And I'm starting to get that vibe
like
from
wraps.
Sweetgreen.
Like the
wraps.
Wendy's wraps.
Good point. So it's just so interesting because we talk so much lately about the importance of coming back to your core product and not getting distracted by all these other things. Leanne, I wonder if maybe salads as core product is not strong enough for a salad brand to be able to do that like a burger brand can. There's just no easy solution for someone like Sweetgreen, it feels like.
What's interesting is they said, one thing that did drive traffic last year was their seasonal harvest bowl, which, is basically a salad. I think it was warm versus cold, but, they're still seeing some success with their core product, but they seem to think that they can find more success or bring in different consumers with some other options. So we'll see how that goes for them.
Well, also part of a trend here, I believe they mentioned that they're going to strategically close some stores. This is a trend. We've already talked on this podcast about how Pizza Hut and Papa John's were going to close some stores. Red Robin strategically closing some stores. Sweetgreen strategically closing some stores, really in line with a lot of what we heard was going to happen. We expected too much saturation, too much overbuilding from some on some brands' parts, and they're going to have to retrench, pull back. That could be a good thing for Sweetgreen. The last thing I'll say about Sweetgreen, I have just wondered this whole time, at what point will shareholders ask for a CEO from outside the organization be brought in? No disrespect to John Neiman, who is a co-founder, but they're almost 20 years into this project at Sweetgreen now. The founders, Nate Rue, recently departed. Nick Jamet being the other co-founder. Yeah, the other co-founder still involved. I just wonder, if you gave this brand to somebody who has a little bit more, has experience at other brands, I just wonder, maybe that could be a solution to figuring out how they could fix it.
Yeah, it might be getting to be time, especially as they try to scale and enter new markets. Sweetgreen really worked well when it was in New York and LA, but they're trying to saturate the country. I think you've got them now in Columbus.
Flyover country?
Yeah, that's sort. What's that? What's the name of that city? I just never think about
I
it.
saw it. I know. Yeah.
And so, I think they're probably also finding that their consumer is different in the Midwest than it is here in New York City. And you can look at, the three of us with very different lives as kind of a microcosm of that.
Are our lives all that differently? And I don't know. Okay.
Thankfully,
well, we won't
yes.
explore that live on a podcast. Let's talk about then the good news in fast casual, and that's CAVA. CAVA, their same-store sales were slightly up, but as Alicia, you pointed out, they were lapping a quarter that did almost 20%. So to be positive over a quarter that was 20% up, I mean, is just extremely impressive. Traffic slightly down, but CAVA seems to still be humming along. So I don't think you can make any grand proclamations about the fast casual category when you look at Sweetgreen, because CAVA is over here doing pretty well. Leanne, tell me about what seems to be working for CAVA.
It's hard to put a finger on because on paper, CAVA and Sweetgreen have a really similar trajectory. CAVA, also currently run by a co-founder, went public in the last few years. Kind of similar brands when you really zero in on it. The slot bowl, as the kids say, I'm told. But something about CAVA is just clicking. One advantage they've always had is that they are the biggest Mediterranean fast casual brand in the market, whereas Sweetgreen has quite a lot of competition in the salad space. So I think that could be a big part of it. They are also expanding. They're entering new markets. They're entering Columbus this year, a city I have heard of. And so
very, very close to my house. In fact, about a 2-minute drive from my house. I'm very excited about this.
A city I narrowly avoided a 5-hour layover in this week, but we won't get into that.
Would have been the best layover of your life. Imagine hanging out with your boss for 5 hours.
Dreams come true. That flight was canceled.
Yeah, right. You just skip town. You're like, nope, I'm just not going to do that one. Okay.
CAVA is also, they're doing some interesting things with menu, but I think that unlike Sweetgreen, their menu innovation they are kind of leaning into their core product in a sense. They're launching their first seafood offering this year, or recently did. I'm sorry. No, toward the end of the first quarter. So that is upcoming. Their first seafood offering, which is a new platform for them, but it's to put in the bowls that you always get at CAVA. So it seems a little more narrow and focused in. They're also adding a lot of roles to their structure. They're going system-wide with the assistant general manager program. 60% of stores currently have one, and those stores are outperforming CAVAs that don't have an AGM yet. And a lot of those roles were filled via internal promotion. So, it's a place where people seem to like to work. And if you have a happy employee, I think that rolls over and you end up with happier customers. And they're adding some corporate roles as well. So I don't know. Again, it's hard to put an exact finger on what the difference is here, how one of these brands ended up like this and the other one ended up like that. Really fascinating case studies.
It is fascinating. Shake Shack also reported this week. They were positive, I believe, 20th straight quarter of same-store sales growth. Portillo's, on the other hand, they were negative. There seems to be a lot kind of up in the air there. Alicia, I want to bring you into this too. When you look at what do you think is going on with some of these brands? I mean, Portillo's is a little bit different because they've been around for 60 years or something like that. And fast casual may not be the best identity for them. But if you put these four brands, Shake Shack, Portillo, Sweetgreen, and CAVA, on the same plane, at least as far as probably a similar average check, probably a similar guest experience, but lots of variability going on with the performance of these brands. Alicia, what do you make of it?
What do I make of it? It's all over the map, just like consumer behavior. With CAVA, I do believe that they have a strong value proposition, which is really creating a significant amount of tailwind. They have invested heavily in underpricing general CPI. I think they've taken less than 17% of price since 2019. That is compared to like 30 plus at many concepts. I also don't want to be dismissive of the fact that CAVA's new restaurants that they opened in 2025 were pushing over $3 million AUVs. That is why even though their same store sales were just 0.5, which was in line with expectations, that's why Wall Street was just fine with that performance. And in fact, Wall Street was really happy with that performance. Over $3 million AUV for the new class is a really strong vote of confidence for the growth, targets that they have, which is about 1,000 by 2032. Portillo's, on the other hand, they've got AUVs that are out of this world, but they expanded way too much, way too fast in Texas without a lot of brand awareness that shot them in the foot. I call it a fail fast kind of scenario. They are now making up for that. And they again, their fourth quarter was negative 3.3 with negative 3.3 traffic and flat ticket. They're making up for some of those sins of 2025, including that breakfast test. But they've got some tailwinds that I don't think are worth dismissing, including that pretty new loyalty program, which has over 2 million members. Now they are solving for the brand awareness gap as they expand into new markets. That is, I think really critical. They learned a hard lesson on that, is people in Texas don't really know what Portillo's is like people in Chicago. And they're making operational improvements. Their speed of service, for example, I think sped up almost 45 seconds. So things like those little blocking and tackling things, I think, are going to mean Portillo's is going to be okay. Shake Shack is a case study in menu innovation. They have things on the market like Dubai Shake that nobody else has. They're also making a lot of improvements on labor efficiencies, which I think is really interesting and worthy of watching this year. They just came out with a good fit menu, like everybody, high protein. What I think is interesting about Shake Shack is their margins improved. So this is mostly a burger concept, and their margins improved 120 basis points because they've been doing a lot of work on the supply chain.
Incredible.
And improving their distribution network. And I think that is worthy of following, because I think everybody could learn something about that.
Yeah.
Sweetgreen, I have no answer for. But your question to Leanne, Sam, is: are investors going to get itchy for maybe some new outside leadership? My question is: when are investors going to start really pushing for profitability?
Yeah.
And I think let me find this number. They had a net loss of $131.4 million on the quarter. Whew. So
yeah, that's pretty brutal.
That needs to be talked about.
Shareholders are not typically a very patient
They don't
bunch.
they like profitability.
They like profitability. All right, that's the end of the episode. Should we do a lightning round? What are we eating today? What are we eating this weekend? Amy, give me one thing that you're going to eat this weekend that you're excited about. Leanne, go.
I don't know what I'm going to eat there, but tomorrow 3 of my best friends and I are going to the Cheesecake Factory in Queens.
Hey, you know what?
It's a big weekend
for everybody.
It's a big weekend for the city girls.
Plan to go for a long walk afterward. Just
it's in a mall, so we're gonna do the mall and Cheesecake Factory tradition in the tradition of people who grew up in the 90s. That is our weekend plan.
That is a very 90s Americana experience.
I'm very excited.
All right, Alicia, what is the experience you're looking for?
I appreciate that. We are hosting, this might be open to judgment, but we are hosting a psychic party at our house tomorrow. We have 20 people coming.
Well,
my wife knows a person who suggested, to break up the winter doldrums, you ought to host the psychic. Here's her number. And so she's coming. We got 20 people coming. We are going to cater from Qdoba.
Okay.
Ooh. We catered from Qdoba last summer for a pool party that we had, and they just did an outstanding job.
Right.
With everything. So they sent an email about a month ago and said, hey, just following up to see if you have any catering opportunities coming up. As a matter of fact, we do. And that's all I needed. So I'm tying that into work. Maybe I'll write a column about it.
There you go. Yes, please do.
I'll be asking you a lot of questions when I see you in person on Monday.
Yeah, I'm starting to think starting to think that perhaps we should do a psychic party as a team, maybe at RLC or Create.
Let me see what this woman says first, before, because I'm a little
I see
nervous.
more psychic parties in your future.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Great.
Well, tomorrow I have to say, my in-laws will be in town, and we are going to go to Smash Park, one of these entertainment places that opened up not so far from us. This is going to be our first. I've done Topgolf, I've done Dave & Buster's, but this is the first, pickleball, bocce, gigantic real estate place that I've experienced. It's one of those things. You're just like, what else do you do with your in-laws? There's 5 kids. Like, let's just set them off to go play bocce ball or something. So we'll see. I will report back next week. We'll see if the entertainment thing is still a thing. All right, that's all for Extra Serving this week. And we got nothing after this. There's nothing. This is it. This is the end. So I'll say goodbye. Thanks to Alicia. Thanks to Leanne. We'll talk to you next week.
Bye.